Hello, this is Adam Lehman, host of Hillel's new podcast, On One Foot, learnings and commentary from today's Hillel. Famously, Hillel the Elder, our namesake, was approached by a man who said, "I will convert to Judaism if you will teach me the entire Torah while standing on one foot." Hillel responded, "Do not do that which is hateful to you, to your fellow. The rest is commentary. Now go and learn." This podcast will elevate learnings from the students, professionals, and partners using Hillel of today as their platform to drive positive change within their Jewish communities, in higher education, and in the broader world. So let's get ready to learn on one foot. I am delighted to be here with our truly inaugural guest for a one-on-one conversation after the roundup we had at our Global Assembly. I'm here with Betsy Polk Joseph. She's a senior director of Jewish life at Elon University and has a really interesting background before coming to Hillel 9 years ago as an author, as a leadership coach, as a consultant, and elsewhere in higher education. So delighted to have Betsy with us, both to hear her Hillel perspectives and frankly her broader perspectives as we learn together. Betsy, I thought for the benefit of those listening or watching, it would be great just to hear in your own voice a little bit more about your background and what brought you to Hillel.
Thanks, Adam. And I have to say, I'm so excited to be your guest today. I'm very honored. We've been talking about this for a while and the idea around this podcast. And I'm thrilled that you got to be on my podcast and I get to be on your podcast. So it feels very full circle. And so the thing that comes to mind in terms of my experience with Hillel is how accidental and yet on purpose my journey to my role was and is. So I was, as you mentioned, I was a longtime consultant, leadership consultant and coach. I had a company. I worked with lots of clients. I wrote a book with my business partner about women working together. And in that time, I was really enjoying the work that I was doing at universities and was able to work with students. I was enjoying the leadership work I was doing, enjoying so many aspects that I didn't realize were coming together in a particular way. And then I received a call or an outreach from the Nancy Luberoff, who was the original Hillel director at Elon, the first real Hillel director at Elon. And Nancy had been retired from the position for a while, and she was involved in a search, and she asked me if I might be interested in this role. And it wasn't really on in my landscape, but as I thought about it, I was like, oh my gosh, all these pieces that I really enjoy are all coming together in this way. And I have to say also, because I was a consultant, I had a consultant's mindset, which was, oh, this is an interim role. This will be a year. That will be great. So I took the role for a year, and it soon morphed into a non-interim role, into a permanent role. And the leadership development I experienced, and I was a leadership coach, but the leadership development I've experienced, the opportunity to learn from and with students and with colleagues and with professionals, has just been so rich. I can't imagine where I would be sitting right now if I hadn't had these 9 years.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I've been both cheerleader and student of the work that you and your team have done at Elon. It's a pretty remarkable story that I want to get to. I should say, too, so interesting because I felt like I went through the same experience in terms of my own journey to get to Hillel, in that, I had so many different professional experiences as a lawyer to begin with for a few years, and then working at the intersection of media and technology on the business side. And all the while, Jewish life had really been a very important part of my life and my family's life and development. But I hadn't actually thought of it from a career point of view. And like your story, got the call. Is it the call from above? Maybe it is. It's truly a calling that started me on my Hillel journey. And in fact, a little similar to what you described, I would go to bed at night, this was now almost 11 years ago, and say, how could I pursue this role, because this just has not been my professional career path. And I would wake up every morning and say, how could I not pursue this role? What an incredible opportunity. And this was true for both of us, to bring what we had learned in other domains and try to both apply it within the Hillel context, and also, as you said, learn every day from amazing colleagues, partners, and students who were privileged enough to be exposed to in the work. I do want to actually go back to Elon Hillel specifically. It would be great to have you share for folks, what is Elon Hillel? What is Jewish life like at Elon?
The Jewish community at Elon University is one that has experienced significant, dynamic, vibrant growth. Growth in terms of numbers and growth in terms of Jewish students standing up and being proud and really coming together as a community. So when I started 9 years ago, the Jewish population was around 7%, 7 to 9% of the population. That was considered great growth. That justified having a team. And now we're beyond 15% of the population. We're actually more, but that's based on self-identified. But it's not just about the numbers. It's about the students feeling so proud and excited about this community on campus. Hillel is very student-led. We often use the term student-led, staff mentored, very student-led. We are there to support the students, to be there for the students, to mentor the students, and to let them take the lead in the programs they want to take the lead in designing and implementing. And so many students talk to us about the real leadership opportunities that they've had. So Elon Hillel is a place where there are real leadership opportunities, where students have a sense of ownership and stake in the work that they're doing. They have a sense of support because they know we're there. They know not only do they know that we're there as advocates, but they also as mentors, but they also know we're there as advocates. I was talking with a student who shared with me, she said, it doesn't matter. So many students know that if they're involved, that's wonderful. But if they're not, they know that you're still there because you're making this place a safe place for us.
Absolutely. No, and that's so powerful. We often talk about, of course, the students who, come to Hillel 10 times during an academic year, 20 times, 100 times. But we are also there for that student who never literally walks in the door, but feels that much more comfortable on campus by virtue of knowing we are there for them. And I love the formulation of student-led, staff-supported, staff-mentored, staff-inspired. I was just out in Los Angeles listening to student leaders at USC Hillel who voiced exactly that articulation and why for them as student leaders, that is so meaningful. Let's go back to the percentage. I mean, that is bonkers, right? That Elon is now up to 15% Jewish student population. I bet if you went back 20 years, that would have been 2%. It's a remarkable story that I actually got better tuned into as my daughters were considering college, and they attended a Jewish day school in the Washington, D.C. area. And we started to see in the classes above them that students were going to this place, Elon, in North Carolina. And at this point, that Jewish day school, I bet 10% of the students there apply to Elon. It is truly remarkable and reflective of the way that we see a real shift in where Jewish students choose to pursue their higher education. We'll talk about life on campus post 10/7 and today, but without question before that, and even more so since that, I think we're seeing this realignment. What do you think you guys did at the Hillel level, but also the administration overall did to really foster such a great environment for Jewish student life?
Well, it's what we did together. I think it's very much a shared proposition, shared story. Elon is a very intentional university, and there's a focus on making things happen. When Elon does strategic planning, for example, it's not a plan that, oh, that's nice and let's put it up on the shelf. It's a plan that actively lives until the next plan. And so when Elon realized that having a stronger Northeastern representation, having a stronger national representation, having more students, more Jewish students on campus, when they realized how important that was, the first thing they did was look at Elon and how do we best support these students? So they really invested in what this team looked like. We are all, my team, most of us are campus employees. We're hired by the university. The board is an advisory board, not a governance board. So we are part of the university. We're in deep collaboration with the university. We are serving on committees throughout the university. And I think that tie-in and that buy-in are essential to the success of Jewish life at Elon. Our administrators are joining, are active parts of our advisory council meetings. It means so much to them to know the support they're receiving and the presence and the active engagement of some of our key administrators.
It's very notable and noticeable. And for the benefit of folks who may not know as much about Hillel's structure, it's actually somewhat anomalous. We have what we call embedded Hillels in a lot of contexts where you have a single professional who may work as part of a chaplaincy or student life office. But typically where we have a team of several professionals supporting Jewish student life through Hillel, that is via a 501c3 entity that has its own board of directors, certainly supported by Hillel International and fully affiliated with, but different from having a whole team that's embedded in a university structure. We do have that at NYU. We have that at Duke. But again, very few. Overall, it sounds like your view is that's been a winning formulation. Do you feel like that's sustainable in other cases or somewhat unique to the strategy and folks involved at Elon?
I think it's working on other campuses. I mean, you just mentioned, I often cite NYU and Duke Duke being down the road. I often reach out to Joyce because I feel like we're very much in this together, but I feel like we're seeing it work. We're seeing this work there. I'm not saying it's the model for everyone. I love that we have such a diversity of models and a diversity of ways of structure, but for us, I think it works. And so much of that is because of the administrators who I'm working with and the culture that has been put in place at Elon that supports that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question for us at Hillel because we are going to see more growth in the Southeast and Southwest. I mean, down the road from you, we've seen High Point really following in a way the Elon playbook and growing a really more robust Jewish student population. We're seeing down at Clemson and, at other schools in South Carolina where College of Charleston had already built up a really meaningful Jewish student population. So as we see universities and colleges, particularly we're seeing it in the Southeast and Southwest, lean into attracting Jewish students, we'll be working with those universities, yes, in a diverse way in terms of how Hillel gets either set up or grown, but also trying to learn from the lessons of what you and your team have built at Elon. Speaking of what you and your team have built at Elon, with partners across the administration, everyone on campus has lived through a surreal couple of years, starting with the atrocities of 10/7 and then everything that followed, and really not focusing in on what happened in Israel and Gaza, but focusing on what happened on our campuses and how that impacted Jewish students. It'd be great to hear in your words what that experience was like at Elon, including any issues that you encountered, students encountered where you were supporting them, but really then I'd love to talk to you about why Elon has been singled out in many contexts as actually having a really healthy campus climate. So maybe we'll start with, what was it like, as a professional leader and community leader at Elon following 10/7 in the aftermath?
Campus came together in many ways. The students were there for each other. We were there for the students. We didn't have the overt cases of anti-Semitism that so many of my colleagues have experienced throughout the country and beyond. But there was a feeling, I think, and a tension of what could this be? Where could we be going? What could this mean? There was a lot of concern about speakers, about how we were working together. And so, in my role, I felt like there was a lot of doing what I could do to hold it together. And that's not to say that there wasn't support. I know that, when I look at where we are now and I look back, I feel like we were largely in a pretty good place. There was a lot of support. There was a lot of active learning at Elon. I think that is another thing that makes a big difference. Nothing's perfect when you're figuring out what to do in the midst of a crisis. But I do feel that there was a commitment to figuring it out, to being open to, that wasn't the right move. But what is, or what can we do? We had, a speaker come on campus, and that caused a lot of hurt. And when I spoke with the university president afterwards, and before I could even get out what I was going to ask of her, she said to me, "Do you think it would be helpful if I had a Zoom call with any parent who wants to come and ask me questions about what's going on and address this, it's like, oh, well, thank you. You just took the words right out of my mouth. And she did it. And I think those stories about learning and reflecting and figuring out how to work together better, that's what made their difference.
Yeah. And I love the anecdote you finished with, in part because we've spent a lot of time, the Jewish community writ large has spent a lot of time elevating the examples of where higher education leaders did not lead effectively. That was certainly a focus down the street for me on Capitol Hill, and deservedly so in many cases, where for any variety of reasons, university leaders didn't step up and show up for their Jewish students at a time when they were being targeted or marginalized or discriminated against. But I feel like there have been so many case studies on shortcomings in higher education leadership looking at that period. It's really important to lift up the examples of university leaders who absolutely were there for their Jewish communities on campus, who were both affirmatively taking the steps necessary to create a healthy campus environment for them, and have grown their campuses in healthy ways as a result. And it sounds like that's the kind of partnership you were feeling from the university president at Elon at the time.
I should also add, there were other pieces to it too. Things that we had in place before October 7th really did serve us well. I mean, the collaboration that was already in place, the commitment to the culture that was already in place, the focus on conversation and getting people together to talk things through. I think all those pieces were so important, and they made a huge difference in how we work together.
There's no question that where there were active partnerships, where there was a university administration that was invested in that kind of healthier campus climate and relationships with key partners and organizations like Hillel, somewhat unsurprisingly, at those schools, they weathered the storm that much better than at schools where, frankly, that just wasn't the focus of the administration or of the student life culture. I was just out in LA, and ironically enough, apart from spending time at many of the LA-based universities, I actually was there with some University of Miami staff because they were doing a program in Los Angeles. And I remember going down to University of Miami not long after 10/7, spending time with the heads of their student life functions. And they had relationships not only with the Jewish students, but with students from groups across campus, including those who wanted to really express their concerns and issues vis-a-vis what they were seeing or perceiving in the Middle East. But the fact that this student life function was in relationship with all the groups and had trust made such a difference downstream. And the fact that they actually had clear rules, parameters, principles, and they had the credibility of acting on those and enforcing them, I think added to the stability that we saw. So this is also why, again, for those listening and wondering, where does all this work go moving forward? Even though some of the challenge and some of the crisis has passed at Hillel, we're not saying, okay, good, well, we're going to focus elsewhere. We're actually spending even more time working with our university partners to keep strengthening not only relationships, but policies, practices, everything that can promote strong culture, so that predictably when issues do arise again, unfortunately, everyone's in a more durable place for that. Unrelated to our scheduling of this podcast, you had written something with a colleague, John Dooley, for our Campus Climate Initiative community. Just a quick description. We have something called the Campus Climate Initiative, where through Hillel International and our Campus Hillels, we partner with about 100 universities to improve their understanding of contemporary anti-Semitism and collaboratively work with them and them with each other on how to strengthen policies and practices. So for that group, you and John had written a piece on the key elements that can produce a healthy campus climate for Jewish students and all students. Can you give us the thumbnail on what those keys are?
Earlier, you were talking about relationships, and then you said policies and practices. And what hit me was, it's all about relationships. All the policies in the world, all the practices in the world don't mean anything if the relationships don't exist. And I think the foundation of what we wrote is about the relationships and the fact that we could so easily work together. It was like a no-brainer. Oh, John was asked to write this article for CCI. He said, he said, oh, Betsy, will you write this with me? We didn't think twice about that, and then we just kind of passed it back and forth. So the relationship that we share was fundamental to the writing about the relationships that make this work possible. And as you were talking to, it also made me think back to why we joined the CCI cohort, why we became the CCI campus. And it was several years ago. It was before October 7th. We had our chaplain, our university chaplain, Kirsten Boswell, had just joined, and this opportunity to be part of CCI popped up on my email. And I thought, we don't really, at this point, it didn't seem like we had a lot of tensions. It didn't seem like we had a lot of things to address. And at the same time, I thought, but I want us to keep the campus climate we have. So I reached out to her and said, what do you think about doing this? I think I was a late comer. We had a very short window to pull together a team at that point, but we did. And I think this speaks so much to so many of the questions you're asking. We quickly convened a committee that was cross-campus. Everyone who's still at Elon, who is part of that committee, is still part of that committee, and continues to do that work together. So I think that it's not just the work that we do as a result of CCI, it's who we are as informing CCI and the relationships that had to exist in order for that to happen.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, we know in our work at Hillel, relationships are the coin of the realm. I mean, they are at the foundation of everything we do. They're at the foundation of how we engage, support, and empower students, because it starts with seeing the student for who they are, what they're passionate about, where they are on their Jewish journey, right? And then supporting them along that pathway. But it's also, respecting the value of relationships, as you said, with administrations across campus, with other student organizations, with other Jewish organizations. It all matters. In the piece that you and John had written, I also appreciated the way you blended together, on the one hand, an intentional effort for inclusion of Jewish students. So not glossing over the particular needs that Jewish students may have, particularly in this period, but marrying that together with the more universal aspects of what it means to promote positive culture on campus through civic engagement with multi-faith relationship building and learning. So I do think there's a winning formula there that recognizes both, in the case of our community, the particular and the universal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes me think of too, in your inaugural podcast, you were talking with University of Miami and talking about the positive Jewish culture at Miami, and you said, well, your culture is so positive and the overall culture at Miami is so positive. And I was thinking, we really, in order for it to work, it all has to work, right? If one culture is really doing great, but then and another culture isn't, then it's not working. And what you're saying is making me think of that. It's that balance of, what is that metaphor about rising tides or lifting up boats or something?
Exactly. Yeah. Rising tide lifts all boats. I think that's it. Right. We as a Hillel movement, but also a Jewish community, need to continue to practice, because I think there's just great examples of where that combination works well, and the pitfalls of when one piece is strong and the other is not, the way that comes back to the doorstep, in our case of Jewish students and the Jewish student experience. So very, very worthwhile theme for us to consider. I want to go a little meta on podcasting, just because part of the reason this conversation emerged is that you were a podcast innovator within the Hillel movement. We've got a few other Hillel colleagues who are out there podcasting, and I recall being at a professional development experience where you were pitching a foundation on your podcast idea. What can you tell folks about your podcast, how it came to be, and how it's going?
Okay, well, it won't surprise anybody if they picked up on the theme of this conversation that my podcast is about collaboration and relationships, and it's called In Collaboration. And it really came out from the thinking, the writing that I did before I was at Hillel. The book that I wrote was all about partnership and really focusing on women for that book, about what women gain from working together. And so on the 10th anniversary of the book's release, I really wanted to do, I hadn't done anything with that for a while. And yet I had so many rich collaborations, and I could see the value of partnership. And I could also see what happened when partnerships didn't work or when opportunities went unclaimed. So that inspired me to really think about what would it mean for and to celebrate the collaborations. And it was also at a time, this was post October 7th. So a time when we weren't always thinking about working together, when things were divisive and so many, there were and there are so many tensions out there. So I wanted to really focus on what could we do together versus what are we doing apart. And so that led to the pitch for the podcast in collaboration with the Mandel Institute. And that led me to say, because I was so happy you were there, Adam, to say, Adam, will you be one of our first guests? And thank you for saying yes. I don't think I'm really a pioneer in the podcasting in the Hillel movement, because I know that Chaya has had a podcast for a very long time. And she was also an inspiration.
Absolutely. Chaya, who's our senior Jewish educator at Beach Hillel. And then I think Rabbi Daniel at OC Hillel also has a podcast. There's something about being in Southern California. I think, we branded this podcast On One Foot, hearkening back to the anecdote I included in the intro to the podcast. So I won't repeat that. But I do want to know, in the On One Foot spirit, a couple things from your vantage point. For someone who just wants to collaborate and partner more effectively, whether personally or professionally, what's an On One Foot starting point for just moving in that direction?
Be there for somebody else, celebrate them, see what they're bringing to the table, let everybody else know. It's so hard to take sometimes credit for yourself, but it's not so hard to give the credit to somebody else. And ask. There's an opportunity to partner and you want to do it, ask.
Yeah. Now I'm hearing three actual nuggets there. Number one, the classic 90% of life is just showing up. Make sure you're there. Make sure you have presence for someone else, for something else. There's an element of then lifting up others that you shared in terms of whether it's sharing praise, whether it's just advancing what they're trying to accomplish. And then you had a third final point, but I already forgot what the third point was.
Ask.
See, there you go.
I liked how you pulled out my first two. So that was good partnership.
Okay. There it is.
Together, we made a good 3-point On One Foot.
And, being on one foot, I got a little unsteady there by forgetting number 3. But in a collaborative fashion, you came right in to lift me up in terms of getting us to the close on that. All right. I want to hit one other On One Foot. It's like a bonus On One Foot.
Bonus round.
Also drawing from your background, you wrote on the topic of women's leadership and women partnering. You are one of many, fortunately, great models of women leading within our work at Hillel. On One Foot, if you were advising a young woman looking at opportunities, whether at Hillel or in the Jewish communal world, what advice would you have for her about how to best position for success?
Surround yourself with people who are going to celebrate you and celebrate others. And sometimes you feel like you're supposed to know everything, that people expect you to know everything. And so that can lead to a cascade of issues, right? And so just remember, you're not going to know everything. Nobody knows everything. Even the people who act like they know everything, nobody does.
Amazing. So, that could be general advice for any young professional. And yet, I think it does speak to the kinds of environments that really recognize fully the contribution of everyone, which historically wasn't always the case when it came to women looking to advance within professional context. Well, as I suspected it would be, it was super nice, Betsy, to be able to be in conversation, really value what you're doing at Elon for Hillel, but really for the whole campus community, and look forward to our mutual podcasting and what it can bring, hopefully, the folks tuning in over time.
Thank you, Adam. I'm so delighted that I got to have this conversation with you. And thank you so much. And thank you for launching this podcast and for including me in it. It means a lot.
Wonderful. For the On One Foot podcast, it's of course valuable and relevant to have the voices of the Jewish students that we're serving. And so we will periodically be mixing in a segment, just hearing briefly from a Jewish student on campus to complement the rest of the conversation for that podcast segment. So with that, and really appropriately for the first student segment, we're going to have the co-chair of our Hillel International Student Cabinet, Einav Tsach, join us. Einav is a senior studying journalism, business, and Jewish studies at the University of Maryland at College Park. So Einav, welcome. Really appreciate you taking a few minutes to chat.
Thanks for having me. So excited to speak with you.
Absolutely. So I just wanted to get a sense from you. You're on campus in College Park at University of Maryland. What is the current vibe for Jewish students on campus?
Yeah, I think the vibe is great. We had a rocky start to the semester with a big snowstorm that came and kind of halted everything for a week. But once we kind of kicked into gear and got back on campus, things were great. The programs at Hillel, whether it's coffee or other clubs under our Hillel, started basically immediately. And it's been so great for me to witness as a senior starting my second semester, just how engaged the younger students are at our Hillel, and seeing the freshmen and the sophomores and the other underclassmen that are just leaning in and already getting on boards for different, whether it's the Jewish Student Union or our minions at our Hillel, just seeing how involved they've become so quickly and how they're executing all this planning that they've put in. It's been great.
Fantastic. Well, that sounds really positive in terms of vibe, and the snow is finally melting, so at least we're through
That's
that
true.
part of the challenge. As you look forward, is there anything you're particularly excited about in terms of where Jewish life is heading on campus at University of Maryland?
I think there's a lot to be excited about. Obviously, the thing that stands out to me the most is the fact that we have a new building. I'm actually going there later today, right after we're done recording, to see it for the first time. The inside, I haven't been yet. So I'm going to be able to kind of see where the future of Jewish Terps is going to be. It's this huge building. I've only seen it from the outside. I think about 3 times as big as our current building. And I think on the one hand, it's going to be bittersweet because our building has served us so well, but it's just really exciting to see the new home of Jewish students at Maryland. And they're going to have this amazing space with so many capabilities, and a pizza oven, by the way, where they're going to be able to not just eat, but come together and really form community.
Absolutely. I mean, the building that's been there for decades has been charming and really critical in terms of supporting Jewish life in College Park for students, but it really has become inadequate. And I, like you, I'm so excited for the new building. It's just essential that at a campus that has more than 6,000 Jewish students, that there's a really well-equipped, well-placed, and large enough facility to host all the amazing activities and experiences that Hillel at College Park is able to provide, and that so many student leaders like yourself are able to foster. I should also put in the shameless plug that there are still naming opportunities available for certain parts of this new Hillel in College Park. So if you're interested, you can call Einav or me or Rabbi Ari Israel, the incredible and longtime leader of Hillel at University of Maryland. Okay, and finally, Einav, I got to see you last weekend. It was just a few days ago at BBYO IC, the International Convention. What is it like for a student like you who is so involved across so many different organizations? What's it like to work across those different organizations? And do you see benefits to collaboration between those organizations?
Yeah. So many things to say. So we met at BBYO. It was a few days ago, and I never did BBYO in high school. So this was kind of my first exposure to that organization's work and everything that they do. And I was really blown away just by the scale of it and how it really brought together the Jewish community from all angles. And so we actually ran into each other during the partner fair. You kind of walked past our table. I was there facilitating a program with World Jewish Congress at the International Convention. We saw each other, and at the partner fair, there were just all Jewish organizations, and each one of them was there for the teens that were, in some cases, about to step onto a college campus, and obviously in a few years going to graduate and enter their Jewish community. And it was just amazing to see how each organization was there to offer them, whether it was resources or connections or ideas to basically stay engaged with the Jewish community. I saw there was one sticker that was being passed around, and it said BBYO today, Hillel tomorrow. So a bunch of people had that on their lanyards, and it was great to see. And I think we just need more of it. more of this type of alignment, working together and making sure at the end of the day that we're serving Jewish students, whether they're in high school or in college, and then obviously beyond, as best that we can.
Amen. We greatly appreciate our partners at BBYO and partnership with them. And we greatly appreciate you, Einav, and everything you're doing to continue to invest in a great set of Jewish experiences, not only for yourself and your peers in College Park, but really for our whole Hillel movement. So thanks for being a part of today's podcast, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you so much for having me. And I don't need to say how much Hillel has meant to me. So really, really great to speak with you.
I hope you enjoyed that student segment featuring Einav Tsach, the co-chair of our Hillel International Student Cabinet, and all of his reflections on Jewish life at University of Maryland. That's it for today's podcast, and we'll look forward to being with you again for our third installment. Take care.